The No Child Left Behind Act was passed in 2001 with the intent of assuring that schools would improve their educational outcomes and that they'd have to make yearly progress to attain these outcomes. The outcomes are determined by standardized testing, and teachers are held accountable for improving the scores. The Act requires not only that the overall score for the school improve, but also that individual subgroups, such as non-whites, will also improve. The goal of the No Child Left Behind Act was that the achievement gap would be closed by 2013. No Child Left Behind had good intentions, but it didn't live up to the expectations of those that drafted the act. It was based on scores and held people accountable without giving the schools a strategy that would fully consider the achievement gap. The laws and the standardized testing that evaluated the outcomes did not properly focus on institutionalized racism and the effects of less obvious discrimination. The gap exists as early as kindergarten, according to some scholars, and trying to just address educational scores with this kind of dynamic does not necessarily get at the root of the problem. There are two types of gaps that need to be taken into consideration when we're looking at the achievement gap. One is the gap between the different schools, i.e., between school achievement gap, and the other is the within school achievement gap, meaning the differences between subgroups within the same school. It's quite possible that subtle bias exists when teachers can relate better to students that they view as being like them. There's also disparity in punishment of Black youth because teachers more often will give them detention or suspension for the same kind of behavior exhibited by white youth. Again, this is a subtle bias, often the teachers are not aware of, but it still has a disparate effect on different groups of students. We also know that minority students are less likely to graduate, less likely to go on to college, and that certain schools have much higher dropout rates than others. An alarming number of students that begin high school will not finish 12th grade. According to one study, about 1 in 10 schools is a dropout factory. The majority of these schools are in urban areas, and the majority of the students who drop out are poor and non-white. This slide looks at high school graduation rates by race and sex, and which groups are more likely or less likely to graduate from high school. The report from which these statistics were drawn states that the rates for high school graduation for Blacks in New York was 35%, Ohio 39%, and Florida 41%. The rates for Hispanic graduation was 32% in New York and 36% in Massachusetts and Michigan.